The NFL is a funny thing. Right when you think you have it all figured out, a bunch of new stuff happens that completely changes the entire picture of the league. So we're talking about all that today, the comebacks / bounce backs that we saw around the league. We're going to talk about some of the dominant defensive performances, not just from week 3, but really some of the dominant defenses that we've seen throughout this season so far. Shout out Seahawks, Steelers, among others that we're going to hit today. And we had a couple cool rookie receiver breakouts that we've been patiently waiting for that we finally got. So going to be a fun episode. We're not going to talk about every single team today because that's hard to do on a Monday when we have so many games to go over. But we're going to try to, as EJ put it, skip across the top of the waves to hit the top things that we saw on Sunday and hopefully give you some more context for maybe some of the games that you guys missed yesterday and why things played out the way they did. Before we get into it, EJ, buddy, how you doing?
Good. Bunch of needle-moving performances on Sunday, both in terms of perception and actuality. Like you said, some rookie performances that were pretty cool. We might get a chance to talk about some tight ends later in the show, but really interesting sort of perception-changing games that happen after the first couple weeks are settling out. Everybody always says, wait till the end of September. We're almost to the end of September, and we got to see some teams really, I think, turn their fortunes around, and we'll get to talk about them today.
Well, why don't we kind of start with the big one, right? The elephant in the room, Carolina Panthers. Not just upsetting the Raiders, but upsetting the Raiders in convincing fashion. I said in the preview show on Friday that I would have been completely stunned if the Panthers won this game. And I am stunned. Not for the reason that I thought, though, because it's not necessarily that I'm stunned or as stunned that they won. It's about how they won, right? It's about the shocking contrast in competency as an offense, going from Bryce Young to Andy Dalton. And I promise this is not just going to be a shit on Bryce Young show. But, you know, one of the revelations that we kind of came across in the Thursday stream that we didn't even realize was that the Panthers going into week 3 were the second most efficient pass blocking offensive line in the entire league. They had like a 15% pressure rate allowed. We're like, what? They take 3 sacks a game. Like I didn't realize that. And then you go back and you realize that a lot of those sacks were not on the offensive line, to put it diplomatically. And then they go, against the Raiders with Max and Wilkins and a very, very aggressive front that we know blitzes a lot. And the offensive line combined gives up 4 pressures and 1 sack. And even then the sack was kind of a funky thing. It was a blitz on a play action look that wasn't really like losing straight up one-on-one. It was more of a scheme sack than anything else. And that offensive line was still performing just as well as it did in week 1 and 2, except now you have Andy Dalton back there who's played a million snaps and was decisive and was accurate. And they had 9 explosive receptions in this game, which I can't remember the last time the Panthers ever had 9 explosive receptions in like a 3-game period. So, yeah, I'm both stunned they won, but even more stunned in terms of how they won, because I think this game kind of made it loud and clear that Bryce was an issue for them, probably the main issue for them. And it's not the thing that I worry about. If people say, oh, Carolina didn't ruin Bryce, like he was just always like that, they just happened to take the wrong guy. And it's like, well, I think Bryce turned into that because of what Carolina did in his rookie year, as well as like not giving him any preseason. So I think 2 things can be true. I think Bryce was the problem, but I also think Carolina, in terms of how they handled him, made him the problem. And it took putting Andy Dalton in there to just kind of fix both of those things.
The stark contrast was really because they only changed one thing. They just changed the quarterback. Everything else largely stayed the same. The offensive line stayed the same. The offensive coaching staff stayed the same. Skill positions have all been there. For the most part, they are healthy. There was no real functional change besides Bryce to Andy. And that is sort of apples to apples as you were ever going to get in the NFL. And I DM'd you in the middle of this game and said, it is remarkable how efficient they are. They are making everything work, and it is crisp. It is clean. The pass is working. The run is working better. And I can't help but think that Dave Canales was sitting on the sideline going, this is what I meant. This is what it's supposed to look like. And the entire Carolina team, you could see, was energized. We got to see Deontay Johnson. He looked like the guy that they traded for 8 for 122, 15.2 per and a touchdown. Chuba Hubbard, by the way, has put Miles Sanders in the cupboard, and I don't think he's ever going to let him out. He had a monster day, 114 rushing, 55 receiving, and a TD. And this is something that has carried over from last season. A lot of Panthers watchers will tell you that Chuba took that job last year and has kept it, and he is a very good two-way player, even better than I thought he would be coming out of college. But over 300 yards passing, 4.2 carries, 4.2 per carry on the ground, and a 3-score lead in the third quarter. You said you couldn't remember Carolina having that many explosives. What's the last time you remember the Panthers having a 3-score lead late in the game?
I have no idea. Like, I think it's got to be a couple years at least, right?
Yeah, it feels like a very long time. And watching that all happen because one player got swapped out is sort of what we were saying. We were alluding to, look, they haven't been great, but Bryce has been very bad, and he's been making bad into worse. So we thought they would be functional. We thought they would be at the midline. We thought they would be, for lack of a better term, kind of Andy Dalton's late career arc. They would be okay. They would be in the middle. And instead, they looked sharp, efficient, deadly, able to do whatever they wanted to. And I think that's what you're really leaning into is I'm not surprised that they were better. I'm surprised they were this much better based off one change.
Well, you know who the Panthers' next game is, right? That they're hosting at home? Cincinnati Bengals. Sounds like revenge game time. Let's go. Excited for that. Also, by the way, speaking of revenge games, Sean McVay versus Kyle Shanahan has long been a great rivalry in the NFC West. It has been 6 years since the Rams have been able to beat the Niners twice in a row. They just did that yesterday. But what's notable about it is how they did it. Again, similar to Carolina, right? It's not that they beat them, it's how they beat them. They were down. Like, they were convincingly down late in the game. And then they rattled off 13 points in the final 6 minutes in a true, like, 3-phase operation to come back and win this thing. It was, they won a Super Bowl. I'm not going to say it was like the most impressive win. It was one of the most impressive wins of the Stafford McVay era for the Rams, just because of who they were playing, how many guys are hurt, what the score was, what the situation was. And similar to the Carolina game, I think two things can be true. I think the Rams played a hell of a game to come back and win. I also think the Niners blew this thing. Like, horribly blew this game. Like, there's going to be a lot of looking in the mirror today up in Santa Clara, because in no universe should they have lost this, and yet they did everything possible to lose it. I'm talking 7 drops, especially a crucial one by Ronnie Bell on I think it was 2nd and 10 that essentially would have iced the game. 3rd and 10, Brock missed a wide open receiver in the flat. He just didn't see him off a rub. That would have probably, given them a big enough chunk play to set up their own game-winning field goal. Instead, they punted and then gave up a huge punt return, which then set up a game-winning field goal for the Rams. You had a huge deep post to Tutu Atwell when they needed it most on like a gorgeously designed pin post concept from Sean McVay, which it looked like he kind of ripped that straight from Mike McDaniel. But hey, steal like an artist. Like that's the best thing you can do as a head coach. There was contributions from Verse, contributions from Fisk, obviously Kobe Turner, Byron Young. That whole young front four made plays. And this Rams team that was missing Kupp, missing Puka, missing offensive linemen, they pulled this thing off. And I am extraordinarily impressed by them, while also simultaneously really disappointed in the Niners because these are the kind of games you have to win if you want to keep pace for the first seed, and they straight up blew it.
I think two things can be true. And the first thing that you said is absolutely true is the Niners left this game on the table. They allowed the Rams to win it. The Rams also reached out and took this game off the table, which they needed to do. And all of that needed to work together for this result to show up because the Rams had no business winning this game. Too many injuries, down by 2 TDs. Stafford at this point reminds me of the old West Sheriff who like walks into town and knows that he is outnumbered and outgunned and stands in the middle of the street and goes, yeah, so, and just starts firing passes, and doesn't matter who's out there. He's not giving up. There's absolutely no quitting him. There really never has been. It was just an ugly, scrappy way to win a football game, but every play counted. Like, you can look back as if I'm McVay and the Rams coaches, if I give the team Victory Monday off and I go back on Tuesday and I'm going through this film, I'm highlighting every single play that made a difference, because if they didn't make a play on special teams, they weren't going to win this game. If the defense hadn't come through in a key stop, they don't win this game. If Stafford hadn't made one of those connections that didn't really look like it was going to happen to a receiver that he might not have the most time with or the best relationship with, they still don't win this game. Like, everything had to go right for the Rams, and the Niners had to basically fumble the bag. Both things happened. The Rams end up winning the game. I'm sure that it won't come back to haunt the Niners in the NFC West. I posted a tweet about that yesterday, and everybody was like, well, the Seahawks are winning the division anyways, which is what I said in the preview episode. But when it comes down to it, you still have to do well in your division, even for the wild card. And this is one I feel like San Francisco's going to look back on and go, damn it, we had that one and we fumbled it away.
Yeah, Hawks have started super hot. Like, it's not just about losing games like this. It's about trying to keep pace with Seattle, because I don't really think Seattle's going to slow down anytime soon. So you just can't drop these when they're in your hand. Now, another NFC team that is riding the struggle bus a lot more than the Niners, though. I'll give the Niners credit. Like, they lost the game, but they didn't look outright bad. The Cowboys, for 2 weeks in a row, have looked outright bad. They are listless. They have no identity. They can't run the ball. They can't stop the run. When they throw, I mean, they're productive, but it's largely empty calories. You know, a lot of it's, I was looking at a stat where they're the number 1 passing offense in the NFL, but they're the number 32 passing offense in the NFL when the game's within 7 points. So it's like, okay, cool.
That's pretty devastating. That's a
pretty devastating
stat.
29th ranked run game, 32nd ranked run defense. Like, this is just, I'm not ready to say they're a bad team, but they play like a bad team, and they have a lot of the hallmarks of a bad team. And it kind of feels like that whenever Micah doesn't take over the game, the defense can't get a stop at all. And I know they're banged up, like Deron Bland is banged up, but it kind of feels like it's Micah or bust, because they lost a lot of their defensive line rotation this offseason, a lot of key contributors. I know they didn't lose Micah, but they still lost, like the Dorrance Armstrongs of the world, right? So it's Tank and Micah and Osa versus the world out there. And then on offense, it feels like it's Dak and CD versus the world. I know they got a big contribution from Ferguson this week, but the offense never really seems to work unless they're feeding CD the ball. So I don't know. I just look at this Cowboys team and I feel like they're almost outgunned, which is insane considering how much money they're spending, but they just don't feel deep. They don't feel complete. They don't feel like they have, you give the Sheriff analogy. They feel like they don't have the guns to keep up with the Niners, dare I say the Eagles, obviously the Saints, but who knows, maybe even Tampa, like, I think would probably put this team in a trash can right now. Like, they just look bad. And I didn't think that they were going to be like the top NFC team this year. I didn't think they were going to look bad. Like, this is what's so surprising about it.
The drop-off has been remarkable. And as you know, one of my friends who's a bartender up the road from me longtime Cowboys fan, grew up in the Dallas area. He is hardcore. And there's a tweet that came out yesterday from Shea Serrano, one of my favorite authors. And he said the Cowboys have a remarkable ability where they can give their fans just enough hope that they're not completely hopeless, but never enough hope that they actually have a real chance. And that's the feeling of summing up what happens when you can't stop the run. The Dallas isn't going anywhere until they can blow up versus the run. They gave up over 6 yards of carry to Derrick Henry, Lamar, and Justice Hill. So no matter who the Ravens handed the ball to, they got 6 yards a pop. If that's the case, forget early season, late season, playoffs. Like, other teams are just going to do that. And we've seen that week for week. This isn't just, oh, the Ravens are very strong or very diverse running the football. The Cowboys do well when they play weak rushing attacks. They don't. And I'm with you. They have a lot of talent, but a lot of talent doesn't equal a good team. And there are as many examples of this as, there are months in the calendar. Like, we've seen this in every sport. Teams without the most talent who play together, who play complementary ball, win games, win championships, go farther than people think they should. And Dallas seems like the reverse. They have talent. They have talent on the offensive line. They certainly have quarterback talent. They have some receiver talent. Doesn't feel tremendously deep, but they do get these sneaky contributions from people like Turpin that are kind of fun. Ferguson chipped in yesterday. It's not that they're talentless in any stretch. It's a very talented football team. Or let me say, it's a very talented roster. It is not a great football team right now. And that makes it extremely unfun to watch if you're a Cowboys fan thinking, hey, we've assembled this great roster. We have all this potential. Let's go roll over some people. And they just aren't able to put it together. When the flash is there, I'm with you. It feels like it's not meaningful, right? Late in games, they chew up a bunch of yardage. They come back so they're within 3, and then they let the other team score again. So there's these little flashes that, again, just sort of ignite that little bit of hope, and then the fire goes out. It never catches.
Same thing happened in this game, right? Like, you look at the final score. If you didn't watch that game, you're like 28-25. It seemed close. Like, it wasn't close. It was 28-6, with 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Dallas finally drove down and got a touchdown, and then kicked an onside kick, got it back, got another score, and that's how it got close, right? It was, again, it's these last ditch fourth quarter efforts where they throw, and they get all this yardage, and okay, they're leading the league in passing. They must be an elite offense. No, they're not. They get blown out at home 2 times in 2 weeks. Like, elite passing offenses can be elite for more than just the last 10 minutes of the game, So it's a profoundly disappointing team. I don't know what their answer is other than just get better,
Get good, kid.
that's literally the prescription, is get good, kid. It's be able to move people off the line of scrimmage, both offensively and defensively. Until they can do that, they're toast. They're absolutely toast.
I want to give the Ravens a little bit of credit. We spent a lot of time kind of dumping on the Cowboys, but the Ravens, by comparison, only allowed Dallas 51 total rushing yards and racked up 3 sacks. If the Ravens have an Achilles heel, and they staved off 0-3, that's the most important thing for Baltimore. They couldn't go there. 0-2 is bad enough. They were staring down 0-3. This, I hate saying must win in September, but if you go to 0-3, statistically, historically, you're screwed. They couldn't do it. They took advantage of it. Good for them. One thing that just spins my head about the Ravens in the bad direction, Harbaugh's team had 13 penalties accepted and is now the most penalized team in the NFL. 37 flags in 3 games. Now, they still found a way to win, which is good. It's to their credit, but that is not really typical for what we've seen out of the Ravens over Harbaugh's very long tenure there. And they're going to have to clean that up because that will come back to bite them. But good for them for knocking off a team they, at this point, should knock off and really had to knock off.
I would say it came back to bite them last week against the Raiders. Like, half the reason
Yes,
they lost
it
that
did.
game is like 1 step forward, 2 steps back on offense with all the penalties they had. I think they had 12 penalties last week against Vegas. So, like, it's already cost them. You could argue, honestly, that this Ravens team would be 3-0 without penalties because it was a mess against KC as well. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, they missed it by a toe. Yes, that's true. But they made it so much harder on themselves against a Kansas City team that has basically just been like meandering slowly throughout September and still winding up at 3-0. But like, they made it so much harder on themselves to beat that KC team by just committing penalties. Yeah, same thing with the Texans. Like, we're not really talking about the Texans today, but they had 7 first half penalties on offense, and over half of them were just on Laramie Tunsil.
Yep.
Either false starting or they're catching him with these illegal formation penalties, which a lot of offensive tackles have been hit with so far this year for not lining up properly. There's a lot of veteran tackles around the league, by the way, that are pissed because they're like, I've been doing this for 10 years. And they're like, we know, we're calling it now. But that happened a lot with Houston too. Like, every time they got something going, a penalty would bring them back. And then, if you put blood in the water for Brian Flores, you're just going to get rolled, and they got rolled. So, again, just being disciplined and not committing penalties can go a long way towards winning games. So the fact that Baltimore overcame that in convincing fashion is pretty darn impressive.
One quick note, and then we'll get back to the show. We're finally starting the fall season, which means lots of family events, holidays, and football Sundays with friends. And you want to look good when you go to all these events, I hope. And that's where Manscaped comes in. I don't own many grooming products, but when you want to take care of yourself and look good, Manscaped has what you need to do it. You don't have to go out and start shopping for individual products or even put together a list. They've got it all for you in one place in the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, and it's the easiest thing ever. In the Performance Package, you get the Lawnmower 5.0 trimmer, the Weed Whacker 2.0 for ear and nose hair trimming, the Crop Soother Ball Aftershave Lotion, the Crop Preserver Anti-Chafing Ball Deodorant, and of course, the comfy Manscaped boxers and a Shed toiletry bag so you can take it all with you on the road when you travel. Check out all of those and more at manscaped.com. And if you like anything in the entire catalog and you want to get it for yourself, you can get 20% off plus free shipping with the code BOOTLEG at manscaped.com. Again, that's 20% off plus free shipping with the promo code BOOTLEG at manscaped.com. Thank you to Manscaped for partnering with us once again. And with that, let's get back to the show.
All right, I want to talk about some of these defenses that really showed out this week. We mentioned the Vikings. I full disclosure, I'm going to be working on a Vikings film room episode this week, and so I'm doing a lot of work on them today to get like exact coverage percentages and blitz percentages and like third down tendencies and how that, all that kind of stuff, because I want to do a full Brian Flores workup. But for now, what I'll say is that man terrifies me because you literally never know what he's going to call. He's one of the DCs where, I look at them pre-snap and I try to guess like, oh, okay, yeah, they're going to be dropping out in like a 2-deep fire zone, or like, oh, they're bringing everybody, or oh, it's going to be a 3-man rush. It's going to be cover 3 with an ad dropper. I guess it wrong every single time. Like I never have any idea what this man is calling. And that's the point, because he's just impossible to read. It almost feels like there's no tendencies, which is why I'm making this episode in the first place, is to find out if there are any. I know that there's a plan. I know that he knows what he's doing, but from an offensive perspective, it feels like you're just fighting this random force of evil that you can't read. You have no idea like what's happening. Like, we saw that Brock Purdy quote when he talked to Flores after their game. And he's like, your scheme is crazy. Like, yes, it's crazy. Like, nobody else does this. Nobody else in the entire NFL calls their defense like this. It is wild. It is insane. It is effective. I am really looking forward to doing this episode to try to understand it better, because right now I don't, and that's what makes it fun.
Flores to me feels like the alchemist that's been locked away in the tower for like years, like scheming and telling everybody that he was going to turn lead into gold, and there were these flashes coming out at night, and those were the blitzes, and people talked about, how he would bring different guys from different positions, but the sort of sum total has been good, but it hasn't felt like a unified piece. It hasn't felt like it ever worked. And I feel like this season he's kind of walking out with a bar of gold in his hand going, okay, I tied it all together. He's got the second best scoring defense in the league. They've only allowed 30 points through 3 games. They held a Texas team that's been putting up 24 on the regular to 38 total rushing yards. Now, if you think back to the week 1 Joe Mixon performance, that seems really extreme, and 7 total points. So all this stuff that we don't understand, this amorphous force of defensive, if you're a defensive coach, defensive good, if you're an offensive coach, defensive evil, is now feeling like it is coming together. And that often happens in the second year when you come over and then you've assembled some of the players you want, you get more of the players you want, the players you had last year, more familiar, they can teach the new ones. And it feels like this defense is vibing on a level where they all get it and they are all getting off on the fact that the offenses don't get it. And it is, I'm with you, one of the most fun units in the entire league to watch because it's surprising. It's like a good thriller. You're like, I didn't see that coming. That's so cool. And it's all working together. It's not just the highlight flash plays. It's not one of those movies where the trailer was really the whole movie and you go and the rest of it doesn't work. It now feels like the whole movie is, award winning and can carry this team. And combined with what they're doing on offense, which we're really not talking about today, Vikings are a really fun team to watch right now.
Yeah, you always know that Andrew Van Ginkel jump scare is coming. You just don't know exactly when. I want to get to the Steelers too, by the way. Speaking of dominant defenses, you mentioned the Vikings have allowed, I think it was 30 total points, right? Their second
correct
defense. Well, guess who's first?
Mm-hmm.
Shocker, the Steelers have a good defense. But even by Steelers standards, this is historically good. This is the first time in over 50 years per CBS that the Steelers have started 3-0 with a defense that's allowed 10 or fewer points in each of the first 3 weeks. So, we're talking, 70s golden age steel curtain Steelers were the last team to do this. What I find remarkable about them is, you look at the secondary on paper, and especially after Corey Trice got hurt, it's JPJ and Minka, and the rest is okay, but it's not anything to really write home about. Patrick Queen has been good, but he's not like Ryan Shazier level good. But what makes this defense go is the fact that they might have the best defensive line, and I'm including the outside linebackers, in the entire NFL. With a bullet, not even close. Because if you're looking at their efficiency when they're on the field, this is a team that is 20th in terms of pass rush opportunities, pass rush snaps. They are 3rd in sacks. They are 3rd in win rate. They are 4th in pressure percentage. They're 17th in pressures, but again, that's just because they're not on the field that much, because they're constantly getting teams off the field, and then they run it down your throat. They're 2nd in time of possession, but when they're on the field, this pass rush has been borderline unblockable. It's Watt, it's Highsmith, it's Herbig, it's Hayward, it's Benton. It's just waves and waves and waves of absolute killers. Nobody can handle them. And, when looking at the Steelers throughout this year, or even leading up to this year, we were like, okay, it's going to be one of those typical Steeler teams that drags you down into the mud and they make you play bad football against them, and they'll beat you with experience because they specialize in winning ugly, bad football games. But they've kind of ascended past that, and they're also playing good football while making you play bad football. And so they're just in control, completely in control. It's not about, having a rock fight out in the backyard. They're just beating you to death with rocks. That's what it is. 272 second half yards to 0 for the Chargers. 0 second half yards. I know Herbert was out. I know Alt got hurt. I know Slater got hurt. An NFL offense made up of NFL players, even if they're backups, should be able to get a yard. They couldn't get a yard on these guys. They had 3 drives combined for -23, and then they had 1 drive that went for 23, but they didn't score. So, this is, to me, the most dominant defense completely in the NFL so far this year. And that's with a linebacking core that is good, but not elite. It's with a secondary that has a couple stars, but is not fully formed. It's just the defensive line is so ridiculous. that you can't do anything. You can't block them. You can't run the ball. And they just beat you to death. Like, this is the most Steeler team or Steeler type of team that we've seen since, dare I say, 2008. Like, we're starting to kind of look like that.
If they keep it up, those comparisons are going to come quite naturally. And the Steelers defense right now is the Bane quote for me, because they were built in this environment, formed by it. They're used to it. They start every Sunday with the same pressure because they know their offense is not going to light it up. The Steelers offense is not built to boat race anybody. It is not necessarily built to be explosive. It has shown some explosive plays, which is nice, but they start every game with that pressure on them. Like, if we do allow more than 10 points this week, we're probably not going to win. So we know what our job is, and they are so good across the board. You talk about their pass rush efficiency, but try and run the ball against them. You're not going anywhere. Their run fits are so fundamentally sound, and physically they dominate those matchups as well. Sunday, they faced a Chargers team that was putting up almost 200 yards rushing per game. 197.5 a game. They allowed them 67 yards on the ground. That is a lights out performance. That is as a defense, we are going to take away the primary strength of what you do and see if you can pivot. They did take it away convincingly, and the Chargers could not pivot. It wasn't close. So this Steelers defense is sort of the best version, again, of what they've been building for several years. The personnel isn't wildly different. Again, defensive line has gotten better with the additions of Benton and Highsmith really coming into his own now in his, fifth year? Like,
around there, yeah.
Watt has always been amazing. Hayward has always been that rock team captain, force in the middle, immovable player that they can build that defensive line around. But again, all the pieces are playing together in a way now that they haven't, and it is completely suffocating. Like, going in to play the Steelers and thinking, oh, well, we're going to get away with this and we're going to be able to do this. Look, somebody's going to do it. It's a 17-game season. Somebody will figure out the code. They'll have an off day. They'll be missing some players. It will happen. But as you look back over the entire season, this defense is going to feel like the biggest, wettest blanket ever over any kind of offensive explosive fireworks.
There's only one pass rush in the league so far that I think is kind of the Steelers' rival at this point, and that's the Seahawks, who have had just an incredible start, to 2024 under Mike Macdonald, a brand new coach, a brand new system. We kind of expected that they were going to be good on defense because Mike Macdonald always coaches good defenses, but to start this hot, this quickly, it's a testament to how good this staff is. They are number one in pressures at 77. Keep in mind, the Titans are number 32 at 27, so they have 50 more pressures in 3 games than Tennessee. They're 6th in pass rush win rate. They are tied for the Steelers with sacks. So again, the Seahawks defense is on the field more because their time of possession tends to be lower. But when they're on the field, that just gives them more opportunities to get pressures. Like, they're still getting pressures at largely the same rate. They just have more of them. But if you're looking at this pass rush as a unit, it's Derek Hall contributing. He had a big day with 8 pressures and 2 sacks. We've seen Boye Mafe go off so far this season. Byron Murphy, who unfortunately left with an injury, has had some really, really freakish reps. Like, it's a whole complete pass rush, just like Pittsburgh. It's not just one guy or 2 guys. It's like 4 of them all working together. And if you get behind on Seattle, good luck. Even if they lose Murphy, with that, I think it was a hamstring for a few weeks. They have so many other guys on this unit that I don't really think they're going to slow down. Like, obviously it hurts, but when you have Hall playing like this and Mafe playing like this, and like the other 8 guys in their rotation all contributing, like, you don't just get 77 pressures from 3 guys. You get it from a whole team. I really, really love the Seahawks front 7, and it almost kind of feels like over the past 3 years, the fruits of all of John Schneider's labor building this roster has now finally paid off. It just took the acquisition of Mike Macdonald to get them there. But like, he is activating a roster that largely already existed. They're just now playing like they were supposed to.
Yesterday was the dam breaking for the Seahawks. It is a rock rolling downhill at this point. They had a ton of pressures. They did not have a ton of sacks on the season. They more than doubled their sack total for the season. They had 5 and they added 6 more yesterday. We talk about this all the time with pass rush and sacks, that you can be getting close, you can be getting better, you can have the pressures, but you don't finish. Yesterday was them finishing. And I don't think that's going to slow down anytime soon. I don't think it's going to be one of those 1 week kind of freakish aberrations where the point shoots up on the graph and then it goes back to, oh, we're not getting a lot of sacks. I think they're going to get a lot of sacks every week from here on out. And you and I have been waiting for the sort of Derek Hall breakout since he got drafted. Again, we thought that was a very good pick by Schneider. We liked the fit. We thought he was going to, again, work into this rotation very well. And then, yes, you add the secret sauce of Mike Macdonald coming in, his ability to maximize guys with certain skill sets, with very sort of narrow roles, and put them in the best possible position to succeed. And we got to see all that yesterday. They held an agreed 2-less Dolphins team to a single field goal. Overall, makes them the 7th best scoring defense in the NFL, and they're also linked to the Steelers in another way. The Seahawks are second in the NFL in second half points allowed at 4.7 per game. Wow. You want to know who's first?
It's got to be the Steelers, right?
Got to be the Steelers. Yeah. So you want to talk about coaching staffs that make second half adjustments. And I saw this in the first week, really, with Macdonald and Grubb in the Seahawks' very first game. They did not play a good first half, but they came out and they played much better on both sides of the ball in the second half. And that is always encouraging to me as a watcher of the league, folks that can go in and say, okay, this was our plan. This is how it's worked out. This is what we're seeing. And these are the switches we're going to flip here at halftime so that we can come out and, again, shut down what they're trying to do and get what we're trying to do across better, quicker, and more often. And Mike Macdonald is not only doing that at halftime, he's doing that from game to game. So is Ryan Grubb. And again, I really think this defense is just going to pick up steam from here. They were close to breaking through. Yesterday felt like the dam giving way and all the water flowing down the valley. The Dolphins just didn't have a lot of chance.
I also want to bring up the Eagles defense a little bit because we, in the preview episode, we talked about how they just could not stop the run and how they could not finish on their pass rushes. They had a high pressure percentage, but they couldn't finish and get sacks. But particularly their run defense, which is why I was so worried about this matchup for them, and I didn't really like the matchup for them, was because of alignment. It wasn't a talent issue. They just were lining up in really disadvantageous ways for themselves, right? You look at the Atlanta game and you've got either Milton Williams or Moro Ajomo lined up at 2I at 290 pounds and saying, okay, go take on double teams. And then obviously they couldn't. And then you wonder why Atlanta's getting explosive runs, right? And so it's like, okay, it's not really a talent thing. It's just they're lined up in a really shitty way. Like, just put Jordan Davis on the field and make him play nose tackle. Like, how hard is this? So I was worried about this matchup for that reason, because I was like, okay, well, if the Saints see that, they're just going to run on you and run on you and run on you. But Vic changed. And part of that was because the Saints were in 12 and 21 personnel for like half the time, right? However, what that allowed Vic to do was to not play nickel. Like, they played base at the 5th highest rate in the entire NFL this week because they played against bigger body personnel groupings on offense, which is what the Saints specialize in. And so if you're forcing that hand and you're forcing them to play base personnel, Jordan Davis is going to be the nose. So he had 26 snaps at either a 2I or as a shade or as a true zero, which is up a lot from the week prior. It's almost like the Saints forced the Eagles to use their personnel properly, and then magically the Eagles' run defense got better. Go figure, right? And like, they still had Milton Williams at 2I sometimes, but it was pretty much just on pass downs. Like, he was mostly at 2I as a pass rusher. So that doesn't bother me as much. But honestly, if the Saints kind of zigged compared to what they were doing earlier with the Zags. And if the Saints played 11 and they forced the Eagles into 11, I think maybe they could have caught them in those same alignment issues. But because they insisted on being in 12 and 21 personnel and doing their normal thing, the Eagles had no choice but to be sound against the run and actually line up properly. So again, it almost kind of played to Philly's favor there. Also, something fascinating was they kind of copy and pasted a lot of the game plan that Fangio had in 2018 against Sean McVay's Rams, which was also a wide zone heavy team that loved, play action and crossers and all that kind of stuff. They played quarters 52% of the time in this game, which is outrageous. Like, that's double, the average that you see for most teams. And they played quarters because, again, they had a bunch of bodies in the middle. They played bare fronts. They played tight. They played, 505. Pretty much anything that we're going to clog the middle of this offensive line with big bodies and then force the run outside. We're going to spill it and kill it and do all that stuff that we're used to seeing Fangio do when he was in Chicago, right? So they copy and pasted that game plan. Quarters is great for cutting those crossers and taking those away as well. And the Saints just had no answer. So it just kind of looked like old Fangio, kind of because the Saints gave him no choice but to look like old Fangio. And it worked. So I'll give him credit for that.
This is experience and guile beating youth and exuberance. Clint Kubiak will figure out that, oh, yeah, he'll go back and look at the tape and say, oh, man, I should have spread him out. I should have put him in more disadvantageous positions. And instead, I played right into the old master's hands, and he bottled me up. And we talked about the Eagles in the preview episode. It took a Saints team that was averaging 45 points a game. This was the offense in the NFL. They were rolling and held them to a single field goal for the first 3 quarters. If you do that, you have a very good chance to win the game. On the Eagles side, they barely won this game. Came down to a very long Dallas Goedert reception or else, but Kubiak will come away from this game with lessons, hopefully put him in his back pocket and realize, I got to think about this a little more strategically when I get into this. I can't just say we are going to exert our will. I'm sure it felt like that. They felt like an offensive juggernaut coming into this game. They're like, we're putting up almost a 50 burger a game. We'll be fine. Bang, ran into the wall. Not fine. They will learn from it, all of them, I think. And the Eagles sneak one away. Again, they're going to need that in what's turning out to be a pretty competitive NFC. This will be a game that people will look back at and go, oh, yep, they stole that one from them early in the year. But overall, fun game to watch. Certainly didn't come out like we thought it was going to, but was still really interesting because of the way that happened.
Also, shout out to the Saints defense too. While we're on the topic of defenses, like this was a 3-0 or 3-0 game.
Yep.
For most of it, like this was a defensive slugfest that broke open late. And like you said, were it not for Dallas Goedert, Philly probably loses. I think they were on 3rd and 16.
Yep.
In their last drive, and he got them 61. So yeah, it was. Not high scoring, but still fun to watch. Last defense we want to highlight for this week. Got to talk about Detroit. The offense has been it's been okay for the most part. They've had their issues. Ben Johnson is still having those kind of fun, like, oh my God, I can't believe he did that play calls, like the hook and ladder touchdown that we saw this week. I don't think the offense is a problem, but it's definitely not scoring like we thought it would. Going into the season, I have faith that they'll right that ship eventually. They have enough talent, they'll be fine. The defense, though, that is the key difference this year. I still think they need more pass rushers. I know it's like 4 straight years of saying that. They still need more pass rushers. They are still overly reliant on Aiden Hutchinson for their pass rush. But the DBs are way better this year. They're way more aggressive. They're better tacklers. They're better in coverage. They're better at everything. And that's kind of been the difference for them, is it's not just Aiden, please get a sack, or we can't cover anybody. It's Aiden, we're covering people. Now you can go get sacks. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, the Lions, we talked about the Steelers not being able to typically score a lot. Lions are on the other end of the spectrum. Usually Ben Johnson provides them with a good 20 to 30 point cushion, and they can play well and well enough to win. Again, Aiden Hutchinson's been on his own plane for the first 2 games of the season. He got shut down a little bit, but now he has more help. It almost reminds me of like a rookie quarterback coming into a situation where there's a lot of offensive weapons and all the coaches saying, you don't have to play hero ball. It's kind of the same thing to Hutchinson. It's not just you anymore. It's okay if somebody throws it over your head. That's not a bad thing. I know we conditioned you last year that was going to be a terrible result, but this year there's actually guys back there and they're going to make plays too. But this Lions team had to play bigger on defense because, again, they didn't score as many points as they usually do. Limited a Cardinals team that looked like they were putting it all together the week before. They hung 41 on the Rams to a touchdown and 2 field goals, which was good enough to win. And that is very good news if you're a Lions fan, that it doesn't just have to be the way we did it last year. It doesn't just have to be a Ben Johnson boat race or else. We can come into a game, score not that many points, have our defense play up a notch, knock down a team that really looked like they were starting to roll on offense and win that way. And good teams need to be able to do that down the stretch, win in multiple ways, because no matter what your favorite thing is to do as a football team, there will be a time during a 17-game season where that misfires and you've got to lean on the rest of the phases. And the Lions look like they can do that with their defense much more comfortably than they could last year.
Believe it or not, but Lions corners are top 8 in terms of forced incompletion rate and top 9 I guess you could say top 10 in terms of success rate, or rather denying offensive receivers successful plays as defined by like yardage gain on certain down. Okay, we're getting very math with it. They're good, okay? Let's just say when we look at the math, they're good. They've held up. Now, they do kind of give up an odd number of explosive plays, but they also make a lot of plays on the ball. It's a whole... again, it's Monday morning. It's, what is it, 8
Monday morning math. That's what people come for, Brett. You're serving them up the hot pancakes they love.
I'll just say this. They either give up 15 plus or they break it up and you're off the field. Typically, though, it's more breakups than giving up 15 plus. Overall, they've been good, especially for how young they are. Again, I just wish they had a little bit more pass rush. How many years in a row are we going to say that?
It's at least 4 at this point.
At least 4. Well, they got Aleem. I like Aleem a lot. I'm talking like edge rush, though, like opposite of Aiden. They just, like, I look at what the Steelers have, right? And I look at what the Seahawks have, and I'm like, it's a difference of like one guy. Like, it's really a difference of one guy for them to get to that level of pass rush. And once they do, sky's the limit for this defense. But so far, they've been very solid. All right. Last thing for today's show, because Giants fans would have bit our head off if we didn't talk about it. Malik Neighbors went off. Like, he absolutely went off. He looked fantastic. I think might have been Hayden from Underdog, or could have been Josh, who tweeted out that Neighbors has the highest target share on his own team of any receiver in the NFL by 5%, which is a massive gap. So, like, this offense is force it to Malik over and over and over again, and we will live and die by that. But it worked. It absolutely worked. So when you combine, Malik being an explosive playmaker and, an excellent ball tracker in the red zone, he made a couple catches in this game where I'm like, good God, like how did he do that? But when you combine that explosive playmaking with a defensive front that is phenomenal at getting after the quarterback, I mean, they just wrecked this Browns offensive line. As unhealthy as they may be, they still got destroyed. Like, that's something you can work with here. Again, I still don't think the Giants are a playoff team. Like, as long as they have that quarterback situation, they're always going to be in that tier, right? But there's talent here. Like, they have a pass rush. They have a defense. They have at least one explosive playmaker. You add a quarterback and you add probably another, if not more, complementary threats to Malik Neighbors, and you can go from okay to the Vikings pretty quickly. Like they're not that far off. They just happen to be missing like the key ingredients. Once they get that, they'll be fine.
Neighbors is a very good start. They knew he was a very good player. That's why they took him up high, and they have not forgotten about him for the first couple of weeks. He had 15 catches for 193 for the first 2 weeks. You talked about the target share. Malik Neighbors is on pace for over 200 targets this year.
It's unreal.
Yeah, totally normal stuff. Nope, not at all. But it's not like they forgot about him like some teams that really sort of grind our gears that have a big time wide receiver and just refuse to throw to him. They've been throwing to him the whole time. The difference yesterday was that he made 2 TD catches and he made 2 highlight TD catches. And as much as we love to talk about numbers and consistency and everything else, that matters. Malik Neighbors arrived yesterday. He's been producing for the entire season. He produced at about the same level yesterday, a little higher on touchdowns, but he made 2 spectacular TD catches, and that's going to start to put him on people's radar. The other guy we need to talk about is Rome Odunze in Chicago. He's had a few close calls through the first 2 weeks, but he had no scores and not a lot of productions. There have been a lot of close misses, which has been really irritating folks that played up the connection between Caleb and Rome. They worked out together famously pre-draft. Everybody thought they were going to hit the ground running. Really, yesterday's biggest news for Chicago, kind of only good news for Chicago, is that connection has now been firmly established. Odunze got his first 100-yard receiving game. He got his first touchdown. And for a team that was counting on a contribution from Keenan Allen, who is currently sidelined, that is very, very good news that, again, the young receiver that you invested highly in, just like the Giants, is paying dividends, is creating separation, is now starting to score. And it looks like that bond that is so important between a starting quarterback and one of his wide receivers is starting to form up in the way that everybody hoped it would from very early on in the season. And again, kind of like the Seahawks defense, I think it's just going to roll downhill from here. Like it's just going to get bigger and better. There were some fits and starts. Yesterday was really okay, we've got that connection established. Everything's plugged in and turned on. Let's just go do what we need to do.
The big thing that I think defensive coordinators learned about these two guys, both Rome and especially with Malik, don't play off coverage against them. Like don't do that. Don't give them free releases. Like the Browns insisted on it. Like, oh, we're gonna play 7-by-1 against Malik Neighbors. Like, dude, do you see the gear he's got in space? Like, don't do that. Get your hands on him. Like, if you try to play off coverage against Malik Neighbors, you will lose. Like, I don't care what corner you have out there. You will lose if you try to play in space against that man. So don't do that. Same thing with Rome. I know he's got the profile of like big lumbering X receiver. He is so fluid. He is so quick. If you give him free releases, you lose. So far, my biggest takeaway is between these two and Marvin, like this rookie trio that we all talked about as being like historically good has lived up to it. Like they all look like they belong in the NFL. They all look like not just stars, but superstars in the making. Slightly different skill sets, obviously. Like I still think Rome is better suited to be an X than say Malik, but I also think that if teams just keep giving Malik off coverage looks, he's going to do this every single week because there are very few human beings in the entire NFL that can keep up with that kind of burst. Like he is unreal gifted if you give him that kind of space. So, God, do I even want to? I'll say it. Tyreek. That's kind of what it reminds me of. Like if you play Tyreek in space, you lose. If you play Malik Neighbors in space, you lose. I'm not afraid to say it at this point. Like I have eyes, right? But yeah, Rome was phenomenal. Malik was phenomenal. Marvin, because again, he went up against a pretty darn good Lions defense. I think maybe it'll be kind of up and down there in Arizona from week to week, but the peaks that we saw in week 2 are possible with Marvin. Like he has that kind of talent. We've seen that. So this rookie receiver class has lived up to it. At least so far, it lived up to it. All right, one last note. EJ wanted to talk about the tight end emergence in week 3, which is true. Goddard had a big day. Kmet, Ferguson, Fant, all these guys. I just want to make one note for offensive coordinators. Please stop making them pass block. Don't do that. Like, don't make them go one-on-one against Jonathan Grenard. Don't make them go one-on-one against Leatu Latu. Don't make them go one-on-one against anybody. Like, just have them help tackles. Have them do, like what the Saints did in week 2, a double team with a running back. Don't make them go one-on-one with a modern, freaky-ass edge rusher because they're going to lose, and then your quarterback's going to get hurt. So that's my only note. They can catch all the passes they want to, but just don't do that. I'm sick of it.
You want to know what it reminds me of?
Huh?
It reminds me of when there were pure third down backs, the little guy, right, that was just there to catch passes. And you'd have an offensive coordinator go, well, you're an O over here, so I'm going to move you over and put you on this X, and therefore you should stop him. And you would get these guys who were, 187 pounds or 201 pounds going against, in those days, edge rushers who were 275, 280, right? And they would get bowling balled, and everybody would say, God, that was such a stupid idea. There's like 3 guys in the league that size that can even slow somebody like that down. And you keep doing it and they keep getting rolled. And then they finally stopped doing it. And that roll sort of went away. Well, tight ends have gotten, at least the pass catching primary tight ends for the most part, have gotten smaller. Their ability to block and their practice blocking, the way that they're used in college, has largely shrunk, dissipated, gone away. It's not the same level of sort of rigor. And people still just go, oh, well, you're an O on the line. I'm going to match you up against that X. And they get just flailed every week. And it's like, eventually I think people are going to go, oh, okay. Kind of the, what the Dolphins did or didn't do with Mike Gesicki, which was, we're going to make you block. Oh, no, you can't do that. We need a blocking tight end. We're going to trade you.
No, we're not.
Yeah.
Mike, you're a slot receiver, buddy.
Right.
That's what you
and
are.
You're really good at it. And all these guys are really good at that too. But we see it at least 2 or 3 times a week. We saw it 2 or 3 times yesterday in key downs. Like, hey, buddy, good luck. We're going to put you up against this top tier, top 15 edge rusher. And geez, that's terrible film. Let's not do that again.
I think the Chargers tried to have a tight end block Cam Hayward on a run play yesterday. I
yes,
saw that
they
on
did.
Twitter.
1-on-1.
And he just took him and he's like, you're my child. Just fucking threw him. What are we doing? Why are we doing that? Like, just do literally anything other than that, please. Like, don't make a tight end block Cam Hayward. He's 35 with kids. Like, it's not going to work out for you. Don't do that. As receivers, though, they were all great. Goddard had 170? Something like that?
Goddard has been completely in the shadows, and fantasy players know this. Tight ends generally this season have kind of been over at the side of the room with nobody looking at them, with very few exceptions. Cough, cough, Trey McBride and Brock Bowers. Like, those guys have been sort of carrying the flag for tight ends. But yesterday, Goddard, we talked about his big catch, which was game-changing and important, not just in a fantasy sense, but it also, led him to 170 yards. Kmet has been on a complete milk carton. It just hasn't been a functional part of the offense. Yesterday was a very reliable target in the middle of the field, helped the Bears move the chains a little bit. He racked up 97 yards and a TD. Ferguson, again, empty calories. 6 for 69. And Noah Fant, who did not have a catch on the season, suddenly popped out of Geno's blind spot and again was a chain mover for the Seahawks, helped them keep a bunch of drives going against the Dolphins. And 6 for 60, is it gonna make anybody's socks pop off? Not really, but it is double-digit points out of a tight end, which has been like hen's teeth this year. You just can't find it, and 4 guys did it yesterday. So nice little trend, nice little shift to get some focus back on the tight ends. But let's not stand them up in front of the Werewolves and say go one-on-one. That's just, it's a lose-lose situation for those tight ends.
So, fun week 3 overall. Still have a couple games tonight that we have yet to watch, obviously, because we're recording this on Monday morning. Jags at Bills, Commanders at Bengals. So, pop by again on Thursday during the TNF live stream. We'll probably talk a little bit about those 2 games, especially because it's, the TNF this week is... Oh, it's Cowboys-Giants. Okay, so we get to talk a little bit more Malik Neighbors on Thursday, too. And maybe the Cowboys defense will be able to get a stop. Who knows? We'll see. It is possible, theoretically, that one day they'll do that. So hopefully you guys come back on Thursday for that. And then, of course, we have the rest of our Week 4 preview going live later this week on Friday. EJ, any last words?
I'm excited. Season's rolling on. It's keeping things quite interesting. NFL seasons usually do, but the matchup so far, I think one of the favorite things I have to say about it is some of the ones we thought were going to be the worst have turned out to be the most interesting, and that is a very good thing in our line of work.
We want to thank all of our executive producers for Bootleg Football over on the Patreon, Andrew, Connor, Icon, Liam, and Mike. Once again, thank you to all of you for making this show possible. Thank you to Underdog. Thank you to Homage. Thank you to all of our sponsors that make this thing go. We will see you guys in a few days. And until then, have a good week.